it is the second day of our conference, first session. So welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name is Chris. I work at the Aquatic Life Institute as the head of strategic initiatives. So before we get started, I'd like to do some housekeeping. First of all audience members are muted upon entry with cameras off. Please post your questions in the Q&A box and we will answer all of them at the end. Every session is being recorded. We'll share the video after the conference. We expect respectful and productive discussions and have zero tolerance for harassment and discrimination of any kind. This session is 1 hour and we have 5 panelists. So we'll hear from 5 panelists on the Global Coalition work, and you can learn more about exactly what they do and how to get involved. I will start introducing the panelists now and we will present them in order. First, we have Don Nguyen, coordinator of the Farm Animal Coalition at Asia for Animals. He is based in Vietnam. Second, we have Craig Grant, head of operations and membership development at the World Federation for Animals. He is based in Scotland. Next, we have Shweta Swood, head of programs at 50 by 40, based in India. Last, we have 2 colleagues of mine at the Aquatic Life Institute. First, Catalina Lopez, who is the director of the Aquatic Animal Alliance, based in Mexico. And then we also have Julia Malerbi, coordinator of the Aquatic Animal Policy Focus Group, based in Italy. So thank you all very much. I will go ahead and get started with Don. Please share your screen. Great.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christine, for the introduction, and it's my pleasure to be here, join this event, and hello everyone. So as Christine introduced, my name is Tang. I'm the Farm Animal Coordinator of the AFA Farm Animal Coalition. AFA stands for the Asia for Animals, and it's a pleasure to be here and introduce more about our work and any potential collaboration. That's really great. Within 8 minutes, I'll try to go through what shortly of who we are, what we focus on, and what are the future plans for any future collaboration, and some challenges as well. The Asia for Animals is a network, currently the biggest network of animal advocacy, like in Asia. We're having 25 core members, but our network is backed by nearly 200 NGOs in the continent. The Asia for Animals started as a conference, but since 2011, we work more collaboratively as a network, and that involves like strategy discussion and supporting campaigns, individual member campaigns. And since 2020, we started to form subgroups. That's why we call it the Farm Animal Coalition. And currently we have 3 subgroups, like including the macaques, the macaque coalition, the Farm Animal Coalition, and the SMAC stand for social media cruelty, animal cruelty content. In this year, we have set up 2 other subgroups. That's the policy subgroup and the Asia's Animal Sanctuaries and Rescue Centers Coalition. The Farm Animal Coalition, as I mentioned, was started in 2020, and we're set up to support the fast-moving farm animal advocacy movement in Asia. And our aim is to, as well as other coalitions within AFA, is to unite all NGOs or organizations and groups that work on animal advocacy, and to make a bigger voice and bigger impact for the animals. Currently, the FAC, we have 13 group members, and yeah, as you can see, like we are working on farm animals, but most of our members are not yet working, like focusing on aquatic life. Most of the groups are focused on land animals. We have fish welfare initiative in our as one of our members, but within FAC we haven't had any like actual like campaigns for the aquatic life yet. So we are really looking forward to like develop further in the near future. For these are the activity work that we are doing at Farm Animal Coalition. We aim to be a centralized like place for NGOs work on farm animal advocacy in Asia. We organize the Asia Farmer Day event, which I will give more further introduction later, because it's one of our main activities currently. And from this year, we also have like formed the subgroups where we support campaigns. So AFA as a network, we don't do any campaigns, but through the subgroup, we support members' campaigns in their daily activity operation. And we act as a shared resource for our member, and we'll try to provide any assistance, any support that we request from the members. Back to the Asia Farmer Day. So this was started in 2020 by my predecessor here, Craig. He used to be the first like farm animal coordinator. And for the last 3 years, we have really grown as in the content and the number of NGOs and speakers involved. So we try to diversify the topics and involve as many people as possible, and not only include our NGO members, but we are trying to get like academies people involved. So we invited university lecturers and even like social ventures leaders and companies in alternative protein, for instance, to join our events. And the second like focus of our coalition is the subgroups. So we have currently 3 subgroups focusing on like different themes, including alternative protein, corporate engagement, and policy in farm animal protection. And these subgroups are all led by experienced senior staff from well-known NGOs like the Compassion in World Farming, the Humane League Japan, and World Animal Protection. These are the members and the aims of our subgroup. So the alternative proteins, as you can see, is unite advocates for animal alternative with special focus on protein that is replacing animal products. And we aim to promote innovative food production of plant-based meat, culture meat, or protein from fermentation, and to try to replace the consumption of conventional meat from intensive farms animals. These are the members that you can see from the screen. And we also have corporate engagements, currently focusing on promoting the end of cage farming for chickens, and we'll be expanding to pigs as well. We also have a policy subgroup that unites individuals and organizations to effectively engage key institutions in developing and implementing policy that benefits farms animals. And we our work member in the subgroup are agreeing to work strategically with organizations and individuals in Asia to campaign for development of and implementation of farm welfare policy. These activities involve like reviewing policy in different countries where our members are based in or have projects in, or even like are aware of any coming change assessment in the continent. So that's what we're doing. Like there are more, but within the limited time, with I can only like focus on a few like main activities. And I'm here. I'm very happy to like introduce about the future that we want to develop. So apart from the 3 current subgroups, we're aiming to launch the 4th subgroup on research, because being aware that there's a lack of research in farm animal welfare in Asia, and especially in some like countries like Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, etc. And we will. Our aim is to get to register Asia Farm Animal Day as an official day or internationally recognized at the Asia. We're aware that currently there are World Day for Farm Animals, but we want to register the one day for Asia as well, to just more centralize and people for mark as a highlight or an annual event for NGOs who are working on farm animal advocacy in Asia, to celebrate the day and promote their work. And apart from those subgroups, we also, by talking to our members, we realize that there are many skills, animal advocacy skills that we could do. We could help the groups to better do their job by utilizing the current existing experience and skills within our network, to share that with those who need. So we will be launching the advocacy skills sharing program for our members. Hopefully we'll start later this year or early next. We will be attending and organizing the events, offline event in multiple countries, and we'll try to gather all the, not only like NGO, but policymakers and individuals in different countries in the coming years. And for instance, the next year we're planning to organize the Asia Farmer Day event offline in Vietnam, where we'll make visible the farm animal welfare issues in Vietnam and in the area. And it's very exciting that next year we will also have the AFA conference. This is the biggest conference for all animal protection groups in Asia, and we'll be hosting it. There were some challenges, I have to say, like as you are aware, like the biggest challenge is that we are still working in silos, and we want to overcome that, because as someone's as a proverb, African proverb say, like if we want to go far, we go alone, but if we want to go fast, we go alone, but if we want to go far, we need to go together. And we believe that working together is improve the capacity and the possibility of us achieving even bigger achievements for the animals, and connecting and working with people who already have their own agenda, have their own campaign is not an easy task. But it's something that we strongly have are committed within AFA and within all the AFA coalitions. So we'll work our best, trying our best to connect everyone, unite everyone. And limited resource, as you're aware. I mean, it's easier for all and for NGO members to get funded for projects, but it's not for a staff member who want to coordinate a network. And we try to support members' campaigns, but we cannot grant them. So that's another challenges that we are facing because of limited funding. And there are not many member or groups who are working on farm animal at the moment. The most majority of our members network are still focusing on wildlife protection and other areas. So we need more group to work to focus on farm animal welfare. And ineffective communication is I guess it's the issue that we're facing when there's a lack of effective platform for people to communicate. It's because of time zone difference, and because sometimes we need instant or more timely response from network member. Just for instance, in case of an urgent appeal to a local government or to a company or any plan, we normally know of any plans quite late when effective communication is something we needed for our work. So there are many other challenges, but yeah, as I say, we're limited timing, and if you want to learn more about our work or want to connect, here's our contact information. And finally, thank you so much for your attention, and I'm here to answer any question. Thank you, Christine. Back to you.
Thank you so much. That was a great overview of your work and future opportunities. I'm sure a lot of our audience members are interested in learning more about how to get involved in Asia. But for now, we will turn to Craig. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thanks to Tang. You can see my screen now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. So yeah, I'm Craig Grant. I'm the head of membership development at World Federation for Animals. Thank you very much to Aquatic Life Institute for the invitation to speak. I'm going to talk a little bit today about what World Federation for Animals is, why we established, and what we hope to do in the future, why we believe we're unique, and the kind of challenges and solutions that we see in our coordination of a global coalition. So who is World Federation for Animals? We are currently around 40 members. We began 2 years ago in 2020 with 19 founder members, of which Asia for Animals Coalition is actually one. So very familiar with Tang and his work. So we've almost doubled in size in a short 2 years. And I want to give a special mention here to the fact that I'm glad that Aquatic Life Institute could join as a member earlier this year. They're bringing a particular expertise with regard to aquatic life, obviously, but for us to truly be the kind of representative global coalition that we want to bring expertise, not just species specific, but also specific to things like geography and culture. So although we're happy to have got 40 members already, we still have a long way to go. So WFA was set up because we believe at this moment in history, there's a genuine public concern over animal welfare, and a kind of a real feeling that relationship with animals was linked to the recent pandemic. And in tandem with that, what we're seeing is strong lobbying from the coordinated lobbies of those with lots of resources. So thinking in particular with regard to this conference, the fisheries and aquaculture resources in the lobbies there. So we wanted to be just as coordinated and just as strong. And what we're trying to bring together here, as it says, is expert knowledge and trying to get that position of being in the room just as they are. So that was our response to set up WFA. In terms of what we're doing, so we wanted to provide something that we felt some NGOs can't have access to by themselves. So what WFA tries to provide is chiefly to participate in the influencing of global decision making at the UN and other institutions of that same size and scope. We also wanted to provide the opportunity to kind of harness the collective strength of all of our peers around the world, which some NGOs may not be able to access by themselves, and also cutting edge information from the international policy field, if you like, that some organizations just wouldn't know how to navigate otherwise. So in doing so, we're working together as a coalition towards 3 ambitious goals. Mainly that animal welfare is recognized at the UN and in international health and environmental regimes and in the rules for trade, aid, subsidy and investment. So obviously there's a huge opportunity across those 3 for improving the lives of aquatic animals that we're trying to tap into across these 3 ambitious goals. How we're working, so at the moment, WFA, its work in the policy team is divided into a kind of working group structure. And at the moment, the working groups are trying to influence the bodies that you see here on the screen. Although I should say that, our team and our structure do react to the goings on of each policy stream. So we would, happily open up new working groups dependent on, in reaction to what would be happening at a particular international institution, or close one down if there was no opportunity there any longer, or what have you. So all of the work that we do feeds into these 2 great things. So the International Policy Forum is a really great, open, large forum, currently of about more than 60 of our colleagues worldwide. And we feed in all of our knowledge and information that we bring from our working groups in what's happening with the policy streams, and feed it into this big forum. And it's a quarterly chance to update each other on what's happening around the world in the international policy field, and see if there are any input opportunities, and how we move forward as a global movement. We also feed it into our global communications network, which serves to not only amplify the work that WFA is doing as a standalone coalition, but also to amplify each other's work. So the work that our members are doing for each other, and amplify those same stories in the same streams. WFA seeks to be a two-way street in terms of knowledge sharing. So we will always try and provide like a knowledge sharing service to our members to kind of, as I said before, to give them cutting edge policy information on what's happening and help them understand it. But equally, we also, our members feed information to us. And this all seeks to really feed that up the way to the international policy fora that we're trying to influence. So that's our kind of structure there. In terms of, to speak a little bit about challenges, I would say that being a global coalition, there's the first challenge there of agility versus inclusivity, by which I mean, sometimes you need to be nimble and act quickly. So I would say that to have set processes where where you can use your members' logos and you don't have to ask for their buy-in because it's already a given. So I think having those processes in place is very important from the get-go. Another challenge is that some groups within our movement have different styles of advocacy, and I think linked to the one beneath it of creating a strong shared agenda, by which I mean that, at this moment in history, my opinion is that the kind of asks on behalf of animals as a whole are still fairly new in places like the UN. So, this is kind of, virgin territory a little bit, and we're really just asking for the consideration of the welfare of animals. However, at the same time, we need to make sure that that doesn't get watered down too much by just kind of having a shared agenda, which is the lowest common denominator. So to counter that, WFA has a strategy. You can read much more about our strategy, by the way, at wfa.org. It's published there. And you'll see that it's sufficiently broad, but with building bricks beneath it, which I think are kind of made up of the working groups. So our working group structure allows our groups to kind of develop position statements or open letters or anything that they see fit that will act in the benefit of animals for that particular policy stream at that time. And of course, all WFA members are welcome to join any of those working groups to kind of share in that influence at any time they like. We also, there's a challenge of getting competing NGOs to collaborate, and I've given competing in sort of quote marks there because I just mean competing in the marketplace for fundraising. But what I mean is that WFA is really a great place where there's no no one is kind of claiming individual glory. Like if WFA is involved in some kind of successful endeavor, then we celebrate it as a victory for WFA and all of its members, so really role modeling that I think is important to avoid that competitive nature, and also to try and as I said at the start, provide something unique, avoid duplication or kind of taking over. WFA really seeks to complement the work of the other coalitions in our field that we're aware of, but we also, as I said, we felt that although some lobbying at the international level was happening by single groups in our movement, that it was never really globally coordinated before. And this has been established through a needs assessment carried out by our founders and our members. And yeah, that's how we think we've kind of managed to circumvent that. So yeah, those are my thoughts and perspectives on global coalition coordination. You can see my details here. If anyone in the audience is keen to know more about becoming a member of WFA with their organization, then you can keep in touch with the contact details here, membership@wfa.org, and I look forward to hearing you. I'll stop there, and thanks again to Aquatic Life Institute. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Craig. That was a great overview. I have to say that we have personally benefited from being a member. We're a small team, and it really helps to have these working groups, tap into those resources and reaching these international institutions. Okay, next we have Shweta. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Christine. I'm just gonna start by sharing my screen. Just give me a second. 1 second. Can everyone see my screen and just my screen?
It looks great.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, let me start by saying hello, and that I'm thrilled to be on this very prestigious panel, on this very important conversation of collaboration and coordination. So thank you to both ALI as well as AA for giving me this opportunity and coordinating this panel. I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about myself, because I think that builds into what I'm speaking about today. So I've been working in the animal protection plus space, as I like to call it, so animal protection / food system space for about 10 years now. And currently I work as the head of programs at 50 by 40, which is a network organization of 70 plus partner organizations who work together to reduce the production and consumption of animals by 50% by the year 2040. I'm not really talking a lot about what 50 by 40 does. I tried to kind of take a broader perspective on what it has been like to work on this issue for the past 10 years. And the views I'm essentially sharing today are based on practical experience and my conversations with experts at various organizations at different levels who also, like us, believe in the power of collaboration and working together. However, as a quick kind of peek, the work that 50 by 40 really undertakes and really kind of lines up very well with some of the things that Craig was saying. We essentially work on 3 major issues. One is the climate change issue on food systems and international fora participation. So we actually have a delegation, and we're really kind of preparing for COP27 right now and ensuring that we have a good representation at different food pavilions there. We really work on building these diverse partnerships and alliances. So how do we get people who are typically not thinking about animals or food systems to work on food systems? How do we get Greenpeace? How do we get WRI? How do we get these allied movements to start taking the food systems issue more seriously and kind of dedicate resources to it? And the third key area on which 50 by 40 works is really kind of how do we increase our focus and alignment with the global majority? How do we ensure that the problems and solutions that exist within the global majority are amplified and opportunities exist for a more balanced perspective on what new food systems or could potentially look like? So without further ado, I'm really like to speak about 5 points I think we should keep in mind, or just have perspectives I think exist when we think about coalition building. So I think the one that is important to me is I think it's important to establish a clear goal. And I think whether a coalition is big or small, whether it is set up as a response to a threat or an opportunity, it is really important to first establish the clear goal of an organization, of the coalition. By default, it is much harder to track the progress on networks, and progress is often not incremental. on top of that, if things are kept vague, it becomes much harder to run a coalition with success. So I think goals are different from visions and missions, which I think coalitions do a good job of kind of creating, in that they're not broad, but they have some tangibility to them, and they can change year on year. But it is important to lay out what you're going to do and what success within that could look like. So I think some things to have in the back of your mind are, what could be a tangible goal? What's our theory of change to achieve it? What's the best service we offer as a coalition? Is it the networking value? Do we do a lot of cross collaboration within the network? Do we want to offer research? Do we want to offer working groups? It can't be all, especially in the beginning. So it's important to see which one do you want to kind of focus on, because you don't want to end up doing a lot, because I think generally in value aligned kind of coalitions, we have limited resources. So what is it? What's the best service you offer? How do you kind of build that? Are all members somewhat aligned to the ultimate goal? And does each have a role to play? Because people who will not kind of take part more often than not will either leave or not part. I mean, they might not really leave but they might not participate actively in a coalition. So I think it's really important to establish a clear goal, and clear goals should be followed by a clear path of action. So coalition can be set up purely for the purpose of capacity building and learning outcomes. So we can just say, here's a coalition. We think within the animal protection space, there is a gap of good kind of workshops, good learning opportunities. We're just going to be working on building capacity. Or a coalition can have campaigns it leads. So either a coalition can say, we've got together 50 organizations. What are the campaigns that these 50 organizations want to run? How do we help them run these? Or a coalition can say, I think here are the 3 most important campaigns we should run. How do we kind of work with the network to run those campaigns? So I think it's important to have clear goals within them, and to understand what is the nature of the work and action that the coalition wants to undertake. Again, is it working groups? Is it not working groups? Is it so how do we outline and then, as much as possible, measure our actions that we've laid out for ourselves? I think this is kind of tied up to the point of engagement, which is betting on winning replicable ideas. Which is that I think it is important to remember that when we work in coalition, so outside of the people who are organizing the coalition, which is maybe all of us on this call today, that everyone within the network actually has a job outside of the coalition. So participation in coalitions is mostly free, and each individual's measurement of success or their KPIs within organizations are rarely dependent on how involved their work is within the coalition, so they will have their own campaigns, their own projects, their own goals that they have to do. It really, so it is important to think that if we want this person who has like a limited time, energy, resource constraint, how do we kind of go about deciding the most effective course of action for them, and then guide the network towards that action? So as an example, let's say 50 by 40 chooses that divestment campaigns, corporate campaigns, and educating the movement broadly on issues of DEIJ are the 3 most successful theories of change for 2023. How do we then convert these ideas into templates that are user-friendly? How do we get other organizations to kind of work on these issues? How do we ensure that there is some uptake of the idea within itself? Do we want to start by providing some funds? Do we want to work with organizations more closely, collaboratively with organizations who are interested in doing this work? Do we want to run some pilots? What does that look like? Replicable ideas, especially if they have templates, like if you kind of create a very strong template of the letters of first outreach, second outreach, they really help reduce the workload on staff. Additionally, this makes this a part of their job profile, which ends up creating a community of interested organizations that are working on the same thing, that are maybe underrepresented in the movement in the beginning. Again, like how the 4th point is that how do we kind of lower the engagement barrier? So I feel a good barometer of success for any coalition is to see how active the members are and how actively they're kind of aligned within the coalition. A broad good graph really kind of puts it at least say 25 to 30% of the members being fairly actively engaged, with another say 35 being at least somewhat engaged. We will always have organizations and members who are least engaged, or for example, they engage only on very limited spaces. So how do we kind of get to this figure of like 70% engagement within the coalition, within any coalition. Obviously, there are like, I think, great examples here from what has already been shared today, but in addition to that, can we have commonly shared points of action? I think the FAST list does a very good job of kind of saying, Happy Monday, start sharing here. You know, they have a very clearly laid out pro forma of like, how do you share a success? How do people learn from that success? Can we communicate regularly on ongoing activities through monthly newsletters? So even for the last 30% who are not superbly engaged, they're maybe still reading something and something's connecting with them. Can we co-create blogs? We often kind of interview different partner organizations. We co-write articles with them to see how do we kind of create these small points of engagement. This is important because I think over time it is really helpful as it builds a sense of connection and trust within the community, which allows you to kind of work on larger campaigns in due time. However, I think most importantly, hiring the right facilitator or the right mobilizer for your coalition is really everything. So as you can see from the screen, like the amount of space the skill mobilizer takes, like it overtakes everything else. So whether you want to do knowledge sharing, whether you provide grants and events, these are all a cushion to stuff that a skilled mobilizer has to do. So I think it's really important that we spend time hiring the right people. We spend time training facilitators on like how to kind of build connections, how to work with people. I think it is really important, especially in today's global world, to train people to be culturally sensitive. I have realized through my own experience that what works in the US may not work in Asia. What is impolite in Asia may be common courtesy in the US. So I think it is important when working in global coalitions to have a broad understanding of what cultural sensitivity looks like. And because our work is really dependent on the connections that we're making, there is no, this is like there is no written contract. We're just kind of working together because we're mission aligned. And so it is important to kind of, well, build those connections well. So those are really, I think, the 5 things that I think really stood out for me when I was thinking about what are my perspectives on global coordination and global coalition building. I'd be happy to kind of take any questions. I think broadly it helps to remember that coalition building is a long-term process, and early stages may not be the best view of how a coalition is doing. So I think we should all hang in there, be tight, keep, close to what we're doing, and just kind of cheer ourselves on. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Shweta. That was a different perspective, and I really enjoyed your suggestions and tips on ways to create a coalition and make it effective. So I will move on to Catalina and Julia, my colleagues. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you to all the panelists. I've learned a lot from your different experiences with coalitions. So I'm definitely going to be incorporating some of your tips into my management of the coalition. Okay, let me share my screen real quick. Can you see that? Perfect. All right, so I am Catalina Lopez. I am the director of the Aquatic Animal Alliance at the Aquatic Life Institute, your host organization. And we wanted to briefly walk you through one of our main programs, which is the Alliance, because as my fellow panelists today, we believe that coalitions are very important in achieving our goals. So a little about us. The Aquatic Life Institute was founded in 2019, mainly to address the gap in the advocacy to improve the welfare of aquatic animals used for food around the world. And we work to improve their lives through science-based advocacy, working with corporations, governments, international institutions, and general industry stakeholders. Since our foundation, like I mentioned, a key pillar of our work has been to build coalition with animal welfare and conservation organizations around the world. in order to improve our impact and effectiveness, because as you know, both aquaculture and the fishing industries are global industries. So in order to tackle the issues that come from them, we need a global coalition. Currently, our two main coalitions are the Aquatic Animal Alliance, which I will be focusing on today, but we also have a coalition for aquatic conservation with conservation organizations, as I mentioned. So we based our kind of outreach to the industry in general on 5 key welfare pillars. And these pillars were defined with early alliance members, which was a small number, but you will see that we have grown substantially. But we wanted to ensure that we had a framework to give recommendations to the stakeholders. What exactly do we want from them? Yes, we want to improve welfare, but what does that mean? And unfortunately for the industry, for a long time, welfare meant that animals used for food were productive, meaning that they were producing meat or whatever it is that they needed them to produce, and low mortality rates, right? So basically, if they do not die and gain weight, then the animals are doing great, right? And this is a very outdated concept of welfare, as we know, because health or productivity parameters are just a fraction of what welfare encompasses. It needs to consider both positive and negative physical and psychological experiences of the animals. And this is key to maintaining healthy immune systems, reducing disease, but also reducing stress, fear, frustration, while providing mentally stimulating environments can contribute to improve physical health as well. So in this, in aquaculture, which is what I'm focusing in on this slide, is a system that is highly intensive, and it's coupled with low animal welfare considerations, and this results in poor health, more disease, more antibiotic use, high mortality rates, negative environmental and ecosystem impacts, and ultimately resource efficiency and productivity are less, which is the opposite of sustainability, which is what most of the industry is going towards. So that's why we included all of this kind of dimensions in our recommendations. And any corporation or government or stakeholder that is committed to improving sustainability must really take animal welfare interventions into account. So from that, we defined 5 key aquatic animal welfare pillars that guide our recommendations for the aquaculture industry in this case. Very briefly, they are water quality, space requirements, and stocking density, feed, stunning and slaughter, and environmental enrichment. And we have focused a lot on this last category because, as I mentioned, we not only want to reduce the negative experiences of the animals, but we also want to kind of improve the positive experiences to kind of simulate or emulate the natural environment for the animals, and that improves their behavioral measures. And then that was kind of our first approach, working with aquaculture, but we also know that welfare in wild capture fisheries is even less considered, is rarely discussed. So we kind of decided to create a similar report, which is called Recommendations for Marine Capture Fisheries, where we kind of urge the adoption of an animal welfare-based approach to fisheries management policies and fishing practices. And it identifies 5 priority areas during the fishing process in which poor animal welfare issues are very common and very significant, which are capture and retrieval, onboard handling, stunning and slaughter as well, incidental catch of non-target species or bycatch, and abandoned fishing gear, also known as ghost gear. And, welfare issues that are experienced in capture fisheries include injury to the animals, exhaustion because they're kept in the nets for long periods of time, thermal shock because of the changes, of course, in depth that bringing up the net causes, and also barometric trauma because of the changes in pressure, mutilation due to stress, and of course death by asphyxiation. So to put the scale of the suffering into perspective, an estimated 2 to 3 trillion aquatic animals are caught at sea on an annual basis, which is 35 times more than the number of animals, land animals killed for food every year. So to address this poor points of welfare that are rampant in the industry, we introduced this concept of animal welfare-based approach to capture fisheries, where the key factor to consider when creating fisheries management policies and kind of creating the layout for fishing vessels and designing new fishing technology. All of this has the potential to impact on the welfare of the animals. So we will kind of engage with stakeholders through the alliances to ensure that these 5 pillars are considered when creating new policies. So how are we creating change as an alliance? So we have a very clear theory of change at the Alliance, which is kind of what guides our campaigns and our work. And it has been carefully planned to address the global scale of the issue, as I mentioned, but also taking into consideration regional conditions around the world, because they vary. The species vary, the methods of production, the types of policies that are in place, everything is different in each region of the world. So, of course, a crucial step for us was carrying out meaningful science-based research in order to achieve the most impact possible, both in the short and the long term. And as a result, all our recommendations are all science-based and verifiable by any stakeholder that we share them with. Of course, another key pillar, as I mentioned, is creating these connections with other organizations to build alliances and coalitions that helps us strengthen our work globally. A very important part of our theory of change, of course, and this was mentioned by other panelists, is that all these organizations have to be aiming towards the same goal, be aligned on the same objectives, while possibly using different strategies to get there. We have a varied pool of organizations that use different types of engaging to create change. And that's great. That gives us more opportunity to reach different audiences, but we all need to have the same objective, the same goal. So the Aquatic Animal Alliance is the leader in this collaboration space for aquatic animals, and therefore it is still one of our main programs and supports all other campaigns that we carry at the Aquatic Life Institute. So with our Alliance members, we have been leading a certifier campaign, working with certification standards for the past couple of years, where we have asked them to mainly in the aquaculture space to include meaningful welfare interventions. And, many of the certifications have had standards for a long time, but unfortunately have not really included animal welfare until very recently. And to avoid risk of humane washing and greenwashing, we want to ensure that animal welfare interventions actually improve the lives of the animals in the farms. And as a result of this campaign, we have had a very good response from the certifiers, and some of the biggest global players have included welfare in varying degrees. Of course, the standards are not perfect and there's much to be improved, but we do see the industry is moving towards that space and is open to listening to these concerns. From there, we launched a certifier benchmark, which is a tool that evaluates the current standards of 6 global certifiers for now, according to those 5 welfare pillars that I mentioned before. So based on this benchmark, we can kind of see who has better standards, who still needs some improvement. And based on this benchmark, we will start engaging with companies in the food industry, retailers, hospitality, restaurants, to incorporate the certifications that have good welfare standards in their supply chains. We will also, and an important part of our work, and Julia will speak more to this, is global policy and regulatory opportunities, where we hope to see meaningful changes as well. So we will kind of use these tools to repurpose them for policy as well. So currently, the Aquatic Animal Alliance has 108 members from 65 countries. And, you know, we kind of harness their power in engaging with these certifiers and, you know, these stakeholders to create change. But the exciting part is that not only are we working on this campaign and others together, but we are also seeing more fish welfare or aquatic animal welfare campaigns on the local and regional levels, which is exactly our goal, by providing support to these organizations in terms of knowledge and research, because as you all are aware, we don't have a lot of organizations around the world that are mainly focused on aquatic animals. So it is interesting that we're seeing more interest from organizations around the world to focus on this work. So very briefly, these are some of the feedbacks or documents where we have engaged different stakeholders in 2022. So of course, certifiers, but also multilateral bodies like UNEP, government agencies around the world. And also we have focused on the European Union because they are revising their animal welfare legislation. So it's a good opportunity to include aquatic animals. And then for 2023, briefly, like I mentioned, we will continue with the certifier campaign, maybe asking them to create new standards for other species that are underrepresented in that space. We will also start working with corporations to get them to include these certifications in their supply chains. Policy is a main focus, both regional or local and with global bodies like the UN and the FAO. And finally, an important campaign for us is advocating for the ban on octopus farms or cephalopod farms around the world, because there are a few projects of that nature coming up. So we want to make sure that we don't add another species to these systems that cause so much suffering. So yeah, thank you so much. This is my email in case you want to learn more about our work or join our alliance. And then off to Julia, who will tell you a little about an exciting opportunity coming up.
Thank you, Kata. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I will just steal a few minutes of your time to spoiler something. So as you can see, I think collaborating is what emerged from all the panelists today as an essential element in our work, in our movement going forward. And that's why we will be soon formalizing this focus group. It's going to be a focus group aimed at initiatives in the landscape of aquatic animal policy. As you can see, this group will be housed under the AAA. This is simply because it will be easier to share information and communicating with each other, but it will not be limited to its members. This means that if your association is currently not yet maybe part of the AAA, but you have an interest or you're working in the policy landscape for aquatic animals, send me an email. You'll be the perfect person to join this focus group. As you can see here, just brief information. Obviously, the objective will be to try and improve the welfare of aquatic animals all around the world. And we will do that by joining forces and capitalize on policy opportunities. Just a quick information, this focus group will be action-driven, which means we will focus on a couple of projects at most at the time and really produce materials. So as something already came up, there are already a lot of groups to network, to brainstorm. I really want this to be focusing on one issue. Like Kata mentioned, octopus, there will be a lot we do in that space. So if you're interested, if one of your colleagues is interested, please forward my email, send us a message, and yeah, stay tuned for updates. And that's all from me. Thanks. Thank you both, Catalina and Julia, for that fascinating presentation about the only alliance focused on aquatic animal welfare. So that's great. Now, well, we only have 5 minutes left, so I will dive straight into questions. I see a question in the chat box, but I think Tan is actually typing out the answer right now, so look for his answer. So in the meantime, I will just get started with one question that I have, because this conference is dedicated to aquatic animal welfare, and most of our audience is interested in that. I just wanted to know, because Asia is a really important region in this area in terms of aquaculture and fisheries, do you panelists have any ideas for what strategies are most effective in terms of what we can do as an organization individually or within coalitions to impact positive change in that region? Maybe we can start with Shweta.
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, I think I maybe have a perspective on this because I was recently met a few different people from who are working on fish welfare at the Fish Welfare Initiative and shrimp welfare. And I think one thing that we realize is that it is really like, I think, virgin ground. So I think a lot of pilots need to be done. So I think how can organizations invest better in pilots? And I think the second thing, as soon as you start thinking about Asia, is that there is such a research gap. That I think if especially meta organizations and coalitions can work towards, collecting, providing maybe even like the first research of its kind in that area, because there's a real dearth of data to be able to base like any interventions on. I feel like those two areas would be interesting points of intervention from my perspective. Yeah.
Great. Would any other panelists like to chip in?
I think collaboration and keep like our communication like regularly, and also for us to share like any resources, as I mentioned, like it's, and Shweta mentioned as well, is there's a need for us to all train and like have good moderator facilitators, and we can share that even with among our network. And so I think it's that's my addition. Thank you.
Thanks. Craig, did you have a comment too?
Only to echo what the others said, especially Shweta, there's a research piece of work to be done and then to be shared. I mean, we have the people we have in the room here are the specialists from Asia and from food systems and from aquatic animals and also from the policy. So what it's almost like once the research is done, the people from our coalitions in the room here need to communicate together to see who's doing what. So it's, coalitions are great because they are like a mechanism for large groups of NGOs to communicate, but the coalitions themselves should also be communicating with each other, which I think is a nice next step.
Great. Catalina or Julia?
Yeah, two things come to mind for me, and I think one is that the funding needs to be distributed better to groups in the ground in Asia. I think we spend as a movement a lot of time trying to carry strategies that work somewhere else to another region and kind of try to put them together there and understanding each landscape. That takes a long time. Whereas if we just work with organizations on the ground, we can save a lot of time. So provide them resources. I think it's key, and creating these coalitions where we support them. I think that number one. And then two, what is in our grasp or how we can maybe support is that a lot of these Asian markets export to Europe and the States and Canada. So how can we ensure that the policies in these regions kind of support the changes in Asia? I think it's another avenue that we need to explore more, because it's a way to get change without having to do all the groundwork necessarily there, but just the end product needs to be a certain way or needs to have these certain characteristics. So I think that's something that we can explore as well.
Thank you all. I know we're on time, but I'll extend it a little bit because I think this question is important, is that if we were to work on more research, for example, in aquatic animal welfare, what are your tips for minimizing duplication in all of the coalition's work and members' work? Maybe we can start with Craig.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, it's being aware of what the others are doing, and like I kind of mentioned there, like each coalition present here has its own individual specialism, and to an extent there's a piece where we want to make sure that we're avoiding duplication, but I also think there's a piece where we want to ensure that we are duplicating for the sake of amplification, so that you know, the message that AAA is putting out, or Asia for Animals, Farm Animal Coalition, or 50 by 40 or us, are actually amplifying one another. So I think, again, for me, it comes back to communication and knowledge sharing, so that if we're all aware of what the other is doing, then we can kind of make a needs assessment of the gaps and what we should be amplifying, and et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense? Thanks.
Yes, that's really helpful to think about it that way. Any other responses?
I can add one point if I may. So again, effective communication, as Craig mentioned, among members and among network is a good way. And within AFA, I think that's why we formed subgroups, so people can share and to prevent any duplication. So I guess that could be useful tips for other network as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any others? Shweta?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think one thing that I've become very conscious about doing now is that before we start any new work in any new region, we first see what's happening already. And then see if there's a possible potential gap that we can identify that is not being filled. And then is there, especially I think when you're talking about Asia, is there room for that gap to be filled? Other organizations, are there people that can actually, even if you've identified the gap, can we do something about it with the people that exist in that room? So I think that is step number one, so kind of eliminate what happens. But I think as a kind of opposite to what I said in the first point, I also feel there are just so few coalitions right now. We don't have the problem of plenty. Most of our partners are also fairly diverse. And I think if there's slight overlap, if there's 15% overlap, I'm not saying 100%, I feel that's all right. And I think the important thing at this stage for us is that how do we grow and how do we become certainly better? And I think just Craig, something you mentioned earlier about how can the coalitions work with each other to know what the agendas are. But I think we're still in the space where if we had 5 more coalitions doing somewhat different things, we'd be fine, because I think there's a real gap in terms of, in terms of how big the problem is and how many people are working on it. So I know they're kind of contradictory, but that's how it is. So yeah.
It's a complex issue, so that happens sometimes. Any lasting suggestions, Kata or Julia?
I just want to say, I think the panelists covered everything, but I totally agree with what Craig was saying. Sometimes I also feel like I don't want to maybe write this because I've already written this in some other document, right? And so you feel like, oh, I don't want to have a duplicate. But I realized that then when we hand over the document, usually the stakeholders and the interlocutors are different from the previous ones. And what you wrote, was adapted to the context. And so it's never the same thing. Well, the concept at the base is, but that's what we're trying to do, right? For us, for aquatic animal, pushing for their welfare needs to be said over and over and in different ways. And so that attracts different people. So yeah, I think we have a lot of potential here. We just need to be careful of, staying in contact with each other, but I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Thanks, Julia. I totally agree. We're doing a good job, and we can do a better job and keep moving forward. So thank you all panelists and audience members for sticking around for an extra 5 minutes for this session. I hope you all enjoyed it. I for sure did. So before we close out, I just want to send a reminder that we will be attending COP27, calling on all global leaders to further conversations about aquatic animal welfare and its nexus to climate and sustainability. So we would appreciate it if you could help amplify our message by sharing on social media, and we've posted it in the chat. And our next panel is in 5 minutes, and it's on new research in aquatic animal welfare. So we have a short break, and we will see you soon. Thank you. Take care.